First Minister, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, let me, on behalf of the Arctic Circle, welcome all of you to this forum and express my profound thanks to the First Minister and the Scottish Government for the cooperation in preparing this forum, but also for the vision to realize that Scotland is now in a new geopolitical neighborhood which has been forming gradually in recent years. And for all of us living in the north, it is indeed of great importance that the engagement of Scotland in this new Arctic northern neighborhood will be profound, dynamic, and productive. I was reflecting on it this morning that when I first came to Scotland as a young student on my way to Manchester, having never before been abroad, and Glasgow being the first foreign city I ever entered, the old terminal that was then in Glasgow. There was a common saying in my country which we believed profoundly, that we were indeed in Iceland living on the edge of the known world. That was how we saw ourselves and our global positions. We were, in fact, in a kind of a global no man's land, where it was a surprise to us and others that indeed there were some people actually living there. Our awareness of the indigenous people further north was then more limited than it is today. So for me and many of my generation to enter the annual Arctic Circle assemblies in Iceland, which now in the last few years have had over 2,000 participants for more than 60 countries, coming to the capital of my country now every year to deliberate the future of the Arctic and its great relevance for the globe, for the continents in Asia and other parts of the world, to have more than half of the G20 countries represented there in many different ways, from political leaders to business leaders to scientific leaders, is indeed a monumental transformation. And what makes it even more challenging for all of us, it has happened so quickly. We can almost say it has taken place almost exclusively in the 21st century. The Arctic Council, which is the intergovernmental platform for cooperation, celebrated its 20th anniversary just recently. And the fame of the explorers who ventured into the Arctic in the beginning of the 20th century became great, not only in Europe but also in America, simply because they were the first representatives of Western science and civilization to enter the North and the Arctic. And then the Cold War, as we all know, closed it off again. So indeed, the northern geopolitical neighborhood of Scotland has only in the last 20 years or so become a territory for global cooperation and engagement. So when many of our Scottish friends ask, why is it that we have not heard about these great possibilities north of Scotland, the honest answer is that we are all newcomers to this fundamental global transformation. We could ask ourselves also, in the light of human history, that it is perhaps also for the first time that we as human race and countries in this part of the world, as well as countries in faraway places, have had the opportunity to create a framework of cooperation and progress for a big part of the globe, almost a virgin territory in terms of international and regional cooperation. And what we call the Arctic, the northern territories that we are discussing in the next 2 days, are approximately the size of Africa if we put them in global terms, ranging from Alaska, twice the size of Texas, over to the northern territories of Canada, each of them bigger than the great countries on the continents of Europe, towards Greenland, which is half the size of Western Europe, then the vast North Atlantic, Arctic oceans, and Iceland, the Scandinavian countries, and 7 time zones in the northern part of Russia. It is a monumental size of our planet that is the foundation of our dialogue here today. But it's also this morning important to bear in mind, why is it? Why is it that this territory, Scotland's northern neighborhood, has become so important in recent years? And we can perhaps map out 5 fundamental reasons for why this importance is now already on the global agenda and will increase and be enhanced in the coming years. First of all, as the First Minister mentioned, the global challenge of climate change, the most fundamental problem of our times and of this century, is never anywhere more acute than in the Arctic. The Arctic, the northern part of the planet, is in fact the front line of climate change. So in terms of science and research and other forms of cooperation in the creation of knowledge and monitoring, it is very important that the scientific community of Scotland, on your great tradition of research and institutional engagement of universities and think tanks and others, and geographical societies, has brought into this global effort of mapping out what is indeed happening in the Arctic. One of the reasons why China, Japan, and Korea are sending research vessels up to the Arctic, and Korea building a polar institute of more than 300 people in Seoul, is the fact that the aggressive melting of the Arctic sea ice is the major cause of extreme weather patterns in Asia. One of the reasons why Singapore is actively engaged in the Arctic is that they have realized that if only a quarter of the Greenland ice sheet melt, it will lead to a global rise in sea levels of 2 meters everywhere in the world, which will mean that Singapore, as they know it and we know it, no longer will exist. And in fact, we are also witnessing the opening of a new ocean on the planet. The first time in human history that there is a new ocean appearing on the planet. And it was fascinating that when George Shultz, the former Secretary of State and great statesman of the Republican Party and various administrations in the US, was asked a few years ago about the importance of the Arctic, he said, imagine if you got the New York Times this morning and the headline was "New Ocean on the Planet," you would realize the significance. And it's a testimony to the far-sighted engagement of countries, not only the leading Arctic countries, but also countries in Asia like China and others, that we are now on the verge of reaching an agreement of mapping out the regulations and the framework to control the fishing in this ocean that's going to open. Secondly, the Arctic on the north is extremely rich in resources that are of fundamental importance for all the major economies of the 21st century. Not only oil and gas, but also clean energy in abundance, rare metals and minerals, almost all the elements that are necessary for economic success in the 21st century, in addition to the marine resources that will be available in the various northern oceans. The third are the new systems of transport that are being created through the north. My generation was brought up on maps in schoolrooms where the bulk of the maps showed the European continent and the American continent, and somehow the north disappeared at the top of the map. We didn't realize that if you cross between continents in the most northern part of the planet, the distance is much shorter. The flights take a shorter time. The shipping can save days and great amount of fuel and cost. And that is why we are increasingly seeing air transport through the north becoming a global linkage. That's why my country has, in less than 10 years, become a global hub for air transport. It's estimated that next year there will be 12 million people going through the Keflavik airport. That's a great leap from the time when I flew to Glasgow in the early 1960s, and there was only one plane going out of Iceland each day that took in both Britain and the Nordic countries in the same route. We will have over 2 million tourists brought in this way. Helsinki in Finland has also become a major hub for transport from Europe to various cities in China and Asia. Anchorage in Alaska is a major cargo air hub as well. We are seeing in the north major air transport hubs that also will be discussed here in a different session. And in that sense, if I may say so to our Scottish friends, it's high time you reorganize your vision of air transport away from London as your major hub, looking at the global air transport hubs in Iceland and Helsinki and elsewhere that already are up and running in the northern part of Scotland and can bring multitude of people to and from Scotland in the coming years. Same in shipping. We will have the CEO of Eimskip, the Icelandic shipping company, speaking later in this forum, where now there is an active transport line of cargo ranging from the United States through Greenland, the Faroe Islands, Iceland, northern Norway, northern part of Russia into Scotland and the European continent. The first time in history we have this entire part of the northern globe interlinked by sea transport of that nature, bringing together a global market of over 600 million people, where Scotland has a great opportunity to become a major European hub in that new ocean-based cargo shipping. The fourth reason, as the First Minister mentioned, is of course the growth of tourism. This extraordinary phenomenon of northern tourism, where people, especially from Asia and from the United States and elsewhere, are now flocking to the north because there they find a kind of a purity and wilderness and civilization and communities, and connect to the planet and the environment in a way which they cannot do. People who have never experienced being alone in nature, been brought up and work in cities of 10 or 15 million people, come to the north almost like a dream planet. The mayor of Kirkenes, the furthermost town in northern Norway, so far away from Oslo that it's quicker to get to Rome, to fly to Rome than to go to Kirkenes, explained yesterday that now every winter they have 2,000 Chinese tourists, he said, big spenders, he called them, coming to Kirkenes simply to fish through the ice. And in Iceland, we are now seeing an extraordinary growth of winter tourism, primarily from Asian, young, educated, enlightened tourists. And to some extent, I think it is a moral duty for us. We often talk about tourism as a business. A moral duty for us to show these people countries of clean energy like Scotland and Iceland, countries of nature and purity and solid communities and open democracies, and allow them to bring back to their home countries and territories that experience. So for me, the growth of northern tourism is not just yet another addition to our economies. It's also a way of bringing to the world our traditions, our environmental concerns, our success in clean energy, and how we see the future of the planet. And the fifth reason is, of course, the new geopolitical importance of the Arctic. The reason why we see in Reykjavik now, every October at the Arctic Circle Assembly, high-level representatives, not only from the United States and Russia, but from China, Japan, Korea, France, Germany, and dozens other countries. Scotland's northern neighborhood has now become a new geopolitical field. And the beauty of the ground rules of the Arctic cooperations that have been formed in the 21st century is that we did not adopt rigorously the 20th and the 19th century tradition that only representatives of nation states have the right to speak and formulate policies and cooperation. No. We realized that the Arctic and the North is over 90% territory within federal structures. And that is why we have given sub-nation state entities like a state within the Union like Alaska, like provinces in Canada like Quebec, like self-governing parts of the Danish kingdom like Greenland, like various regions in Russia like Yamal, Nemes, and Archangel, the same position and the same platform and the same opportunity to influence policies and cooperations and projects as the formal national states at the table, United States, Russia, China, Japan, and others. So the beauty for Scotland in engaging in this new Northern Arctic cooperation is that whatever is the constitutional position of Scotland, you can here and now, today and tomorrow and for every day as we go forward, enter this cooperation in a fully fledged, productive way. Because the diplomatic, open, democratic ground rules of this Northern Arctic cooperations are 21st century inclusive ground rules, where the main question is, what can you contribute, rather than what is your formal position. So, my friends, it's up to Scotland how much you want to engage, and you have a lot to contribute. One of the major reasons why we are here today is not just to present to you what is happening in this new geopolitical territory surrounding Scotland, but also to encourage Scotland to come into this community of cooperation with your great assets, with your great traditions of research and political and philosophical thinking, with your modern science and academic institutions, with your extraordinary record in clean energy production, with your entrepreneurial and your business community, with your emphasis of social equality, engagement, and democratic processes. The new Northern Arctic neighborhood of Scotland needs Scotland for the success of our cooperation. You have an extraordinary, fascinating role ahead of you by engaging on many different levels in the emergence of what I have called this new geopolitical triangle, which is in fact the center ground of the Arctic. A geopolitical triangle which consists of Greenland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Northern Norway, and Scotland, being in the middle between the Western Arctic consisting of Alaska and Canada, and the Eastern Arctic consisting of the northern part of Sweden and Finland and the vast northern territories of Russia. Scotland is extraordinarily well placed in this new geopolitical triangle. And with all the assets and the successes that you have created and your great traditions and history, to become a major player in the future of the New North. That is why we are here today. That is why I am so grateful to the First Minister and the Scottish Government and for all of you to having become a part of this new journey. Thank you very much.